Hello everyone and welcome to something that I would like to be an extensive series and amount of episodes, aka a podcast, about true crime. I know, very original, never heard before, but hear me out. Here, you'll be able to hear, to listen, to learn about new stories that you haven't been able to hear anywhere else before. Because my plan is to tell you about cases around the world, cases all around the world that are less known and almost never mentioned in popular podcasts. I mean, we all know about Ted Bundy. We heard that story 100 million times. Jeffrey Dahmer, nipple belt guy. What's his name? Ed Gein. I mean, everyone knows those stories. But here, I'll try to bring you, as I said, less known stories that you never heard before. Hi, my name is Fabian Adams, and you're listening to Freaked Out Podcast. So, before we even jump straight into the story, you may hear that I have an accent. That's right, that's because I'm from Serbia. And if you're familiar with my voice and with everything you hear today, is because I had this podcast in 2021, and it went up for around 15 episodes, I think. But then life happened, and I just had to stop recording. I didn't have time. My stories were getting boring. I was getting boring telling them and making stories, so let's try this all over again. And if Taylor Swift can re-record her whole discography, I can re-record few of my episodes. And that's today's episode, a re-recording of the episode 5, about the Russian doll man. It's 2011, and there is a series of desecration and excavation of Muslim graves in graveyards in and around Nizhny Novgorod in Russia as a result of terrorist attack on Moscow airport. So people were pissed at Muslims and they were going and destroying their graveyards. And it's November 2nd, 2011, and the police is investigating these events and patrolling one cemetery in Nizhny Novgorod in Russia, and they came across a man who was wandering through the cemetery in the middle of the night.
Who are you?
That man was Anatoly Moskvin, and when they asked him what he was doing there, he said that he was just looking around. However, he was immediately detained, and his apartment was searched.
FBI, open up!
In the apartment, the police found, besides all other evidences, 29 life-size dolls. The dolls that will leave everyone speechless in the following days. So, who was Anatoly Moskvin, indeed? Well, he was born in Nizhny Novgorod, the 5th largest city in Russia. He was bullied at school and later testified that one day he came home in bruises and cuts. He explained that he had been sexually assaulted by an older student. It's not known whether he admitted this to his parents or not. He was above average intelligent, and since he was a child, he was obsessed with death and ideas about life after death. He explained that his obsession dates back to the moment when he attended the funeral of one 11-year-old girl, when quote-unquote man in black forcefully made him attend, where he was forced to kiss the girl, the corpse, 3 times, as religious customs dictates. Quotes, "One man pushed my head down. I had to kiss her. I kissed her once, then again, then again." End quote. Then her mother placed the ring on her daughter's hand and on his hand, and then they were married? This custom is similar in my country. I remember when they took us to the funeral of my friend's mother as children, like the whole class went. And they didn't make us kiss her, obviously, but the coffin was open and we had to make a circle around the coffin and light a candle to her head, next to her head. And I know on other funerals that people actually kiss the corpse, so disgusting. I mean, but it's religious custom, so debatable if it's disgusting. It is disgusting.
Bruh.
It's weird. And it's okay. I say in my country because we are also Christian Orthodox as Russians. So Moskvin graduated from the Faculty of Philology of the University of Moscow, and he very quickly became respected in the academic community. His main areas of academic interests were Celtic history and folklore, as well as languages and linguistics. Moskvin had a deep interest in cemeteries, burial rituals, death, and the occult stuff. He kept a personal library of over 60,000 books and documents, as well as a large doll collection. Not those dolls, by the way, normal dolls. Fellow academics described Moskvin as both genius and eccentric. He never had a girlfriend. He did not drink. He did not smoke. He led a closed life with his parents, and he led a celibatary life. And he explained that after he was sexually assaulted in school, he swore to himself that he would lead such a life for his whole life. In 2016, actually, he was reported that he planned to marry a 25-year-old native of his hometown who attended his trial, those fans of criminals, those pick-me girls, I can change him. That's the story for another time. Those delusional girls. He spoke nearly 13 languages. I speak 2, and English is my second language. And I am a C2 level of English, and I have this accent. But okay, he was above average intelligent. I'm stupid.
Okay.
He wrote several books that were known in academic circles. When someone says that a book is popular among academics, that means it's boring. At least for us stupid people.
Okay.
Sometimes he also worked as a journalist. He was describing himself as a necropolist, which is basically the person who studies graveyards and cemeteries. Necropolist. And he was considered an expert on local cemeteries in the Nizhny Novgorod region. During 2005, he visited over 750 cemeteries with the task of listing all the buried people. He claimed that he walked over 30 kilometers a day, that he was drinking water from the puddles, that he was starving, that he slept in abandoned houses in the areas around the cemeteries, even in the cemeteries itself, that he even slept in a coffin that was ready for a burial next day.
Okay.
This guy has problems. A couple of times during his travels, the police stopped and questioned him actually, but he was never detained because he justified himself by saying that he was an academic and that he did all of this for scientific purposes. He claimed that I don't know who gave him this task. Did he give himself this task to go and document every dead and buried person in those cemeteries or someone... or he was doing actually for something. Between 2006 and 2010, Moskvin worked as a freelance correspondent for the newspaper of Nizhny Novgorod, which was called Nizhny Novgorod Worker. He was publishing articles twice a month. His father also sometimes wrote for the paper, actually. During 2008, Moskvin wrote an extensive series of articles on the history of Nizhny Novgorod cemeteries that appeared on the paper. And then we jump straight back to 2011 when police finds 29 life-size dolls in his room and garage in his apartment that he lived in with his parents. But those were not just any Russian dolls. Those creepy dolls, babushkas. I was afraid of them as a child. How that small, when you open, that there's a smaller doll inside, and you open that doll and there's a small doll. Creepy as fuck. Those were not those dolls. Definitely not babushkas. Those were actually dead bodies of young girls dressed up and made to look like dolls. 26 of them actually. 3 were literally dolls. They took the video of the room and you can see the dolls just stacked up, sitting in chairs, on sofa, on shelves, everywhere. You can see this video is still available on YouTube if you want to watch. And also his room was trashed. Kind of looks like my room, trash everywhere, important and non-important things scattered around. It's called creative chaos, okay? It's not trash. Although only 26 bodies were found in his apartment, quote-unquote only. Police thinks that he dug up and desecrated around 150 graves. They found numerous grave accoutrements such as metal nameplates removed from headstones. Police also discovered instructions for making the dolls, maps of cemeteries in the region, and a collection of photographs and videos depicting open graves and disinterred bodies, although none of this evidence could be conclusively connected to any of the bodies found in the apartment. According to the investigation, the bodies primarily came from cemeteries in the Nizhny Novgorod region, although some of them may have come from as far away as Moscow. And the Nizhny Novgorod and Moscow are really far away. Let me check that. I'm sure they're not close. Yep. The two cities are 440 kilometers away, which is 273 miles. And the journey takes from 3.5 to 6.5 hours, depending on the train. Are you using the speed train or not? Moskvin actively cooperated with the investigators, and he claimed that he made the dolls over a course of 10 years. His parents, who were away from a large portions of the year, although they were living with him, they were unaware of his activities, and although neighbors few times were telling them that they smell foul smell coming from their apartment, they always came to the conclusion that it's due to the bad sewage system beneath the building, and probably the amount of trash in his apartment. His parents actually saw the dolls, and they never thought those were bodies. They assumed he only liked life-size dolls. And I'll explain later how those dolls looked. So it's not hard to believe that when you see the doll, you think it's only a doll. It's that good he masked them. In an interview after his arrest, Moskvin said that throughout his life he was obsessed with death and the idea that a person could be brought back to life with the help of science or black magic. By studying Celtic culture, he... Is it Celtic or Celtic? We in Serbian say Celtic. Maybe it's Celtic, I don't know. But when he was studying Celtic culture, he learned that they communicated with the dead by sleeping on their graves, so he practiced the same ritual. Motive? As I said earlier, he believed that he could bring that back to life. And when he felt, this was his words, when he felt a dead child or woman calling him from the grave, he would try to sleep over their grave. He later started digging them up, mummifying them and taking them to his apartment because he believed that it would be easier to communicate with them in a friendly environment and a warm home rather than the cemetery. He later even told the families of these victims, quote unquote, "You have abandoned your girls and I brought them to a warm home." I would smack him so hard. He dried the corpses using... I don't know if I mentioned, but none of these dolls were actually alive. He just dig them up from the graves. The corpses and bodies from the graves. They were already dead. So he was not, killing them, which is better than it could have gone, He dried the corpses using the combination of salt and baking soda, and then he hid them in secure and dry places in and around cemeteries. And once the bodies dried, Moskvin carried them to his home, where he used various methods to make dolls in an attempt to give the children functional bodies to be used when he eventually discovered a way to bring them back to life. He was feeling that their physical remains were too decayed and too ugly for them to feel comfortable or happy.
Okay.
And he was unable to prevent the bodies from withering and shrinking as they dried, so he would wrap the limbs in strips of cloth and stuff the body cavities with rags and padding to provide fullness. Sometimes he was even adding wax masks decorated with nail polish over their faces before dressing them in brightly colored children's clothes and wigs. He even inserted buttons in the eye sockets so they could watch cartoons with him.
Okay.
Excuse me? So these details made the bodies appear to be large homemade dolls, which prevented their discovery. And they look more like weird human dolls and not like actual dolls. If you watch that video on YouTube, you'll see them. You can not tell that those are bodies and those are remains, but they also don't look like normal dolls. You go out and buy a life-size doll. It's not like in pretty dress, and it's more like a stuffed jacket with something. Those ski jackets, and well, imagine that jacket with a wax mask and drawn on eyes, and then that jacket stuffed with stuff to be looking like a body, like a doll. And it was unclear if each doll contained a full set of human remains or not. And when they moved the bodies, oh, this is horrible. When they moved the bodies, they heard strange noises coming out of them. Well, guess what? This psycho installed music boxes inside their chests so they could play music or make some noise when he interacts with them. The police also found a dried up human heart in one of them. In another, they found that person's name carved up inside her chest, and a hospital tag in another one. Moskvin was aware that he was committing a crime, but he didn't feel any remorse. He felt the dead children were calling out to be rescued, and he believed that rescuing the children was more important than obeying the law. In police, he even said, quote-unquote, "Don't bury them too deep, I'll dig them up anyways." The psycho. He was also motivated by his own desire to have children, specifically a daughter. Moskvin often regretted that he never had children, and at one point he attempted to adopt a young girl against the wishes of his parents, actually, but his application was denied due to his low income. Thank God. Imagine this psycho having a daughter. Moskvin denied any sexual attraction to the dolls, and he instead considered them to be his children. He spoke to them, he interacted with the corpses, he sang songs to them, he watched cartoons with them, he even held birthday parties and celebrated holidays for their benefit. And when he was asked why some of the dolls were in his garage and not in his room as the other ones, he said that he just stopped loving them. Great. His quote-unquote victims were 3 to 25 years old, like 3-year-old. And the most disturbing one was the girl that was already murdered before. So her mother said that she felt like that her daughter was taken away from her all over again. Moskvin was charged under Article 244 of the Criminal Code for the desecration of graves and dead bodies, a charge that carried up to 5 years in prison only. Originally, Moskvin was also accused of having defaced the graves of Muslims, that was considered a hate crime, but this charge was later dropped. After a psychiatric evaluation, it was determined that Moskvin suffered from a form of paranoid schizophrenia. I mean, of course. In a hearing on May 25, 2012, the Leninsky District Court of Nizhny Novgorod deemed Moskvin unfit to stand trial, and they released him from criminal liability. He was instead sentenced to coercive medical measures. The prosecution was satisfied with the decision, and they did not appeal the verdict, so he was sent to the mental hospital. So Moskvin was removed to a psychiatric clinic with his stay to be reviewed regularly. In February of 2013, a hearing approved an extension of his psychiatric treatment. Moskvin's treatment was again extended in 2014 and yet again in 2015. In 2014, a spokesman said, quote, "After 3 years of monitoring him in a psychiatric clinic, it's absolutely clear that Moskvin is not mentally fit for trial. He will therefore be kept for psychiatric..." Oh my god, these long words, my tongue is tired. "He will therefore be kept for psychiatric treatment at the clinic," end quote. And in September 2018, Moskvin's doctor stated that he was no longer dangerous and petitioned the Leninsky District Court of Nizhny Novgorod to release him for outpatient care from home. However, in February 2019, a subsequent psychiatric evaluation found that it was too early to release Moskvin, and the hospital withdrew their petition. And that's the last information I have about this case. Then, in 2020, the COVID started, and then last year, we know what happened in Russia and Ukraine. So this is the last thing I have about him. He is probably still in mental hospital, as he should. Especially after he said that he would commit his crime again, remembering when he said, "Don't bury them too deep, I'll dig them up anyways." He's a danger to that society. And yeah, that's the end of our story. If you like the story, you should subscribe. We are on Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, literally everywhere. You can follow us on Instagram at freakedoutpodcast, or even watch us on YouTube. I mean, there is no video version of the episodes, but there you can listen this podcast on YouTube too, if you find that easier. Is the youtube.com/freakedoutpodcast, or you can follow me on Twitter. That's Fabian Adams, but instead of a B is a 6, the same on the Instagram. And that's that. See you next week. Thanks for your time and bye.